Okay, good evening everyone and welcome to today's meeting of the Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation. I'm sure you've realised I am not Councillor Lynn Stagg, but I am deputising due to the matters on the agenda item, which I'll come to in a moment. I'm not aware of any fire alarms, etc. So if we do have a situation, can we make our way outside? And I believe there's an ice skating rink in the way of where we normally meet, so we're around the corner. But just follow Joe, who will make sure none of us die. So thank you for that. We are being live streamed from a camera in the corner. If anyone, well, people that work for the council and councillors, we don't get a choice, but if there are any members of the public that do not wish to be filmed, then please make us aware. No? Okay. Great. And councillors, you will know how to use the microphones, etc. Wonderful. In which case, we'll move to the formal agenda. We'll start with... Yeah, I was going to do that under... Yeah. So, have we got any apologies, Joe?
No apologies for absence.
Wonderful. And we'll quickly whiz round so that people watching at home from their warm living rooms can know who we are. So I'm Councillor Ben Dowling. I'm normally the Cabinet Member for Planning, Regeneration and Economic Development, but as I was the member who originally took a decision back in July on behalf of Councillor Lynn Stagg, as she had a declaration of interest, I am once again deputising for her in this on this occasion.
Councillor Chaudhry from the Labour Party.
Councillor Simon Bosher, Conservative Party.
Wayne Layton, Finance Manager, Portsmouth City Council.
Kevin McKee, Parking Manager, Portsmouth City Council.
Felicity Tibbury, Portsmouth City Council, Transport Planning Manager. Pam Turton, Assistant Director of Transport.
Joanne Wildsmith, Democratic Services.
Peter Bell, Legal, City Council.
Thank you very much, everyone. So, are there any declarations of members' interests? No, no, and none from me. Wonderful. So we'll move to the main agenda item, which is the call-in that's been sent back to us. Pam, are you introducing this? Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So following the Scrutiny Management Panel decision taken on the 9th of November 2018, the Residence Parking Programme of Consultation approved on the 31st of July 2018 has been referred back to the Cabinet Member Councillor Dowling for reconsideration. It's recommended through this report that the portfolio holder considers whether he wishes to reaffirm his previous decision taken on the 31st of July 2018, which was that the progress on the previously approved residence parking programme was noted, and that the revised programme of consultation with local residents, as set out in the report, was confirmed, and a consultation on each area listed be progressed. The report outlines the decision that was made by the Scrutiny Management Panel, which was that the panel has concerns about the changing boundaries of MB and MC zones subsequent to informal surveys, and therefore considered that the decision had been taken without adequate information. The report then details the information pertaining to the proposed consultation on MB and MC zone under Section 4, in addition to the structure of consultation information proposed for MB and MC zones at 4.2. Included as Appendix A is the original report that was tabled on the 31st of July 2018 meeting.
Thank you, Pam. So, colleagues, obviously we've come full circle back to this meeting. Do I have any? We'll take questions, comments, or just keep it as an open discussion, I think. Anything from colleagues? I'm assuming Simon has something to say. Oh, and I've also got a written deputation which opposition members have seen, I assume. I hope. Yeah. It has been circulated. And the written deputation is from residents of Mulberry Lane and the Close in Caution. So, yeah, Simon?
Can I ask, has the TRO for MB and MC been implemented and what's happening with the zones from a practical point of view?
Yes, it is being implemented and will likely go live in early January, 2nd of January. So yes, in accordance with the decision that was taken. No, it was a subsequent one in October.
Yeah, I mean, I have some various comments, but it's probably more of a procedural thing in so much that if the original decision was called in back in July, we seem to wait an inordinate length of time, 3 months, before we actually had the scrutiny panel meeting which reversed the decision effectively or asked it to be reconsidered. Quite frankly, I'm at a loss as to understand, and I'm perhaps looking more towards democratic services and the legal advice, as to why, when we had a call in for the vessel Victory Energy decision, was the call in heard in a very short space of time, but this took over 3 months before we actually had the call in. And this is not a reflection on you, Councillor Dowling. We had to wait over 3 months to hear this particular call in, and by that time decisions had been taken to progress with TROs when in fact we were talking about inadequate information.
Are colleagues willing or able to comment?
Obviously, I'm certainly happy to comment. I can't say why that is. I was eminently available to deal with this matter. Frankly, I was not engaged to be asked to deal with it. Had I been asked earlier, I would have dealt with it. Simple as that, in terms of legal's input.
I think there's an action to come out of it that perhaps isn't necessarily a formal action, although it could be a formal action. Joe or colleagues will advise whether we can make it one or not, but about how we deal with the calling process. But I suppose it's not for me to make any real decision there. And I assume it's within the realms of governance, audit and standards. Maybe there's a question around, is there a timetable that should have to be followed in that process? Simon?
I appreciate that it's not quite for this forum, and this is perhaps more of a question for the city solicitor to answer, or the manager of democratic services, as to why it takes so long to do this. Because, and I'm not wishing to be political, but the conspiracy theorist would say, as governance and audit and standard scrutiny management is chaired by a member of the administration party who made the decision, people could look at this and say, is there an element of this being kicked into the long grass? Now that could equally apply to any political party that's in power at this moment in time, because they will probably hold the chair of scrutiny. But to wait an inordinate length of time and then for a decision to proceed to go ahead, it sort of flouts in what was a cross-party scrutiny management decision to send the actual decision back again. But if you go back to the reason why this was actually called in the fact that it didn't fit with the original boundaries of the informal consultation, and I'm not going to re-rehearse those arguments because I'm sure we've all got better things to do, but there was by having significant changes, it rendered the information inaccurate and inadequate, and actually there was a cross-party consensus that it should be referred back. But the decision to MB and MC has ploughed on regardless, given the length of time it took for the call-in to actually be heard. So that's where my concerns actually happen, because we seem to be where we are now in the fact that it's going to happen. So this meeting effectively is a fait accompli. Whatever you decide, it can't be undone because we're already proceeded with the TRO and we're moving forward. It would have been more appropriate if the TRO, because it's such a significant change, had actually been withheld for the time being, or alternatively, I come back to the point that I was making, and so much that the scrutiny management meeting should have happened a damn sight earlier than it actually did, which I think is a flaw that needs to be addressed in the procedures of the council, in effect, because that's where we are in that embarrassing situation. But I mean, going forward with the decision, we are where we are with that. There are concerns I have about the rest of it, with regard to the rest of it, because all the others will go through this informal consultation anyway. Says me looking across the room because I think I'm going to get a nod. But the concerns I have as part of the decision that you made, Ben, were to do with areas having experience of displacement traffic on the back of something being introduced automatically get considered as a priority over and above the existing programme. Now, I think that's fundamentally wrong. We've got a deputation here, and I've met with that gentleman several times. He has issues. Whether I totally agree with what he's actually put forward or not is beside the point. But in theory, he's been waiting a period of time, and he's on a programme to be considered going forward, and the programme is probably there for the next 18 months, 2 years worth of being under consideration, and he's quite far down that particular programme. But going forward and looking at some of the other zones that have been brought in ahead, there is going to be displacement traffic, and thinking particularly about the one that is, I think it's HE, which is the one in the Baffins ward, which was the reason why you're sat here. But that is an island, effectively, surrounded by Copner Road, Powers Court Road and areas of Baffins. Those people are going to be saying, we've now got displaced traffic. So therefore, they will get considered ahead of all those people that have been sitting patiently waiting to be surveyed. And I think that is patently wrong. But I guess it comes back to introducing residence parking zones piecemeal across the city in the way that we're actually doing it, and having a material impact on neighbours, which comes back to where we were to start with. So there's two strands there. I think the first one is sort of addressed anyway, and I think it's not really, it's a matter for Michael Lawther, I think, and it might be worth getting Michael to actually, if he could perhaps write to me and members of the council, members of the committees, as to why it took so long for this call-in to actually be heard. But I don't think we can have a situation where we're prioritising people with displaced traffic because a zone is actually introduced at the expense of people that have been waiting for a significant period of time.
So I think I completely agree with you on the timescales, and I think there potentially is an argument that says this is an example that we need to learn from as a council. And if there is some grand conspiracy around pushing dates back, then somebody forgot to tell me. Which is entirely possible. I'm not going to, but as far as I know, that wasn't the case. So I think there's a lesson to learn in terms of process, and perhaps it's something that GANS may want to look into. I'm happy to. I don't even know who chairs GANS at the moment. No, he's just resigned, so it's somebody else. It's Leo. It's Councillor Madden. So
can I just suggest, if I can, Ben? I mean, we have a standing order, and I'm sorry if I'm boring people out there in TV land, with regards to anything that comes to full council that requires an action, it has to come back to full council within 3 meetings.
Yeah.
So nothing can get put into the long grass. I think it's eminently sensible that we are required to call in a decision by the time it gets published on MIS, which means that we effectively get 5 working days to call in a decision taken by a cabinet member. So we are under, we, opposition, are under a strict time constraint about doing that. It's only fair and reasonable, I think, that any call-in should be heard within a specific time. Now, whether that's a month, 4 weeks, 6 weeks or something, I'm not overly fussed, but I think 3.5 odd months is pushing it a little bit because there is no time constraint there. And I think irrespective of what the call-in may be, there should be a time constraint on when it is actually heard. It's not beyond the wit. The committee's all got standing deputies, and it can be done pretty easily, I think, and it should be built into standing orders. But I appreciate that's not for this environment.
Yeah.
But as I have a captive audience on the back of it, I'm making those points in the hope that somebody can action them and take them forward.
Yeah. So I'm happy to speak to Councillor Madden to make it an item for a future GANS meeting.
With respect, I don't think it's a matter for GANS. I think it's a matter
Who
for
is this?
standing orders on that basis. That would have to be a full council decision.
But doesn't it
Sorry,
Yeah.
that's a matter for standing orders, and that would have to be a full council decision, or it would have to come out of a report through GANS as a recommendation to full council.
Yeah, which is what I was getting at.
But we've got at least a couple of council meetings between now and the end of the municipal year. It doesn't take much to build a quick report into one of those, because I can't imagine there's going to be too much dissension. The administration would be agreeable with something like that, because it takes away any suggestions of a conspiracy, and quite clearly anybody that's actually calling in a decision is equally going to be wanting a timescale, because they're going to want to be cracking on and having it heard, basically.
So, Joe, how can we record an action of that ilk?
Yeah, the minutes will reflect that your comments, that you wish that to happen. It won't be a formal decision, it'll be a commentary, and I'll pass it on to the city solicitor for dealing with.
Great, wonderful. After all that discussion of process, I've forgotten the second point you made, Simon. I genuinely apology.
As I said, we are where we are with MB and MC, because the TROs have been done and they're going ahead.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of issues that I have with the report. The fact that we put a timescale on when we do and don't do informal, and in this particular instance with MB and MC, the boundaries had changed, so it was inaccurate and inadequate, but we are where we are with that. At the risk of mentioning the word Brexit, a lot of talk has been had over the last few days about the fact that, the referendum was 2 years ago. A lot of people have died or changed or anything else like that as an argument to hold that referendum again.
Right, so
the same argument could...
a new referendum, not the same one again.
You still want leave or remain as part of it. Irrespective of that, the argument being put forward that the demographics have changed at that level still applies at a local level with regards to people dying and moving, irrespective of boundaries changing. And I think when you go out with a prescriptive TRO that says this is what it's going to be, yes or no, and we saw with the TROs that were considered by Councillor Stagg that quite a lot of them were saying, yes, I agree with it in principle, but I disagree with the timings of it. Do you put them down as being somebody who's in favour of it or somebody who disagrees with the TRO? Because you could make a case in both directions as far as I'm concerned, and particularly with the MC zone where the figures were 9 different, I think, between those in favour and those against, which is very, very marginal. And I actually pointed out to Councillor Stagg that there were at least 2 that appeared to be duplications coming out of the same address, because which were highlighted as being reasons as to why it should be implemented. And several others had actually said, I'd like a zone, but I don't want the times, they don't suit me. Arguably, you could have changed that to against, with a different interpretation on it. I think you need to look at doing the informals every time. I know there's a cost associated with that, but you're going to get something that best suits the majority of people from the day one when you look at it from an informal point of view, rather than actually saying, this is the TRO, this is the times, yes or no, which is what we're at. The second point that I have is regards to if we get displaced traffic from putting in a TRO into adjacent roads, then we will prioritise that area. Because I think that is penalising those people that are already on the list, and I think that is patently unfair. Now, either we look at doing something that is radically different with regards to residence parking zones going forward, or that piece should actually be removed from this particular report until we have a better way of actually doing it.
Okay, so I think the first point, as you've kind of intimated yourself, is kind of null and mute, because the TRO is out, it's happened, it's being implemented, and right in thinking there are no other zones in the programme of consultation that would fall under the going straight to a TRO anyway. So I think that piece has come and gone. Yeah. In terms of so we've got the Mulberry Lane example. In terms of someone, the order of the list, I think there's 2 things that I would comment on. I think the first thing is that it's a programme that can be edited, and I would have no problem in the future if it would have to be done so in a public meeting and a public decision on it. But if there were strenuous reasons for why the programme had to be altered slightly, then I'm assuming that's something that officers would actively look at and would bring a paper, and then someone would make a decision. Hopefully, Councillor Stagg will be back in this chair making those decisions. I think the other thing to say is that it's not necessarily a zero-sum game where if Area A gets automatically surveyed due to displacement, that doesn't necessarily mean that Area H therefore doesn't get consulted, because I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I think the assumption is that there's always X amount of resource, but I think we can take it upon ourselves as a council to think inventively and creatively about how we use council time, council resources and council officers. And if we're in a position where, in order to fulfil our commitment to both the areas that are on the programme of consultation, as well as those areas that may or may not experience displacement from those areas, then that's something that we as a council need to look at in terms of resourcing that, as opposed to the detriment of residents in either type of area. And I think that's kind of where I'm at on that. Councillor Chowdhury, I'm conscious that we've not given you much of an opportunity. Simon and I'd like to talk.
It's not a problem. Mr. Boshar is given the more advice and suggestion, that's fine. But as I said, if our council resources are available, then maybe continue do the survey. But if it's not resource available, then I think we not go forward on this scheme. Because main issue is the resource. If his resource is not available, so what we should do?
Okay, well, I'm willing to take it upon myself as a member of the administration to work with Councillor Stagg, as it is her portfolio, in terms of how that resource is shared out. Simon, you look eager to come back in.
Having been a cabinet member, I'm acutely aware that the resource is largely one person, and I don't think that has significantly changed over the past year that does this and does all that.
We have a second person who has started in September. Started in September, and they're currently being trained through a bit of a baptism by fire, basically, to get up to speed with the programme.
Well, yes, no, down to statistics, isn't it? Fabulous. But certainly knowing the stress levels that were involved, I think it's fair to say that it was a pretty stressful thing, because residents parking, TROs, and certainly introduction of WO lines all sort of fell within largely this one person. And it's obviously a very emotive subject, and I think it's fair to say that coped brilliantly, and the best that I can say, and my thanks go to her. But there was a programme that was introduced in 2016, I think. I left it alone because it was a publicly available programme. I didn't amend it. I don't think my predecessor amended it. I think this was done under Councillor Elcombe when he was the cabinet member, largely because I was acutely aware of the fact that with a programme in place of when the surveys would likely to be done going forward, then residents had an expectation of when it was going to be. Now, whether they liked the fact that they have to wait 18 months for it or not was immaterial, but at least they knew that's what was actually going to happen. By having this introduction of, if there is displacement, we will prioritise it, which is what's happening, those people on that list, this gentleman's written deputation included, has no expectation of when it's likely to happen, and he's in the lap of the gods with speaking to officers who will quite reasonably say, I've got no idea, it could be end of next year or the beginning of the year after, because that's the length of the programme. And if they are going to do that, it has to come back, in theory, it can't be an officer or a behind closed doors decision to stick this new area in. It has to come back as a change to the programme, in my opinion, every single time, if that's what we're going to do, to give people like this gentleman and others who are already on the list to come along and say, hold on a minute, Councillor X, why are you penalising me in favour of somebody else because of an action that the council has taken as part of a TRO? I'd ideally like to see a situation that says you don't do this if there is displaced traffic, or you'd like to think that officers would come forward and say, if we introduce this, there's going to be displaced traffic, that you don't prioritise. You stick to the programme of what you've got. But if you aren't going to do that, it should not be an officer or a cabinet member decision behind closed doors. It should be done in a public meeting with the reasons why they are going to be penalising other residents on the list in favour of others.
So,
I'd argue that you either take that bit out, or it is reworded to say it is a cabinet decision or a public meeting decision to introduce that, because I don't know whether that actually says that at this moment in time.
okay, so I think we're conflating two separate issues. I think the first is around someone who's currently on the programme that for extraordinary reasons, whatever those reasons may be, we've had one example in the written deputation, wanting to move up the programme. I think that is an area where a cabinet member would have to, in a public meeting, change the programme, and I think everyone is, I'm getting nodding, so everyone is in agreement on that. In terms of the issue around the automatic consultation around areas of displacement following the implementation of zones which may or may not be implemented depending on the consultation results, I think that is an issue around capacity within the council, so in order to not disadvantage the people that are on the programme, because I agree there is, we don't as a council want to be disadvantaging people that have an expectation of timescale that are on the programme and they've been given a broad idea of what that timescale is. We don't want to change that timescale as a result of the decision to do the automatic consultation around neighbouring areas. So I think we've got, I think the recommendation as it stood in July, I almost certainly will be approving in a second, but there is a resource question there, and perhaps we can have a discussion at Cabinet briefing or similar forum to look at that problem. One last opportunity. Any comments? At which point we'll be making a decision.
Is it possible that we can bring a report to a future cabinet meeting, making it a cabinet member's decision to amend the programme and not that something that's actually done at officer level with respect?
I believe that was confirmed in the minutes of the original meeting, but certainly we can...
I mean, can we check that it's whether or not it's been confirmed already in a public meeting, and if it is, then I don't really want to waste everyone's time by doing it again, but if it's not, then I'm happy for that to come forward. Well, personally I'm happy for that to come forward. I'm not sure who it would have to come forward to or in what guise. I'm looking at legal and democratic services.
If I check through the minutes and
Yeah.
then circulate what's there to you both.
Yeah. So to be clear, that's a change of the programme that is outlined. That is not in relation to the automatic consultation. As that, I consider that's a resource matter for the administration and for council officers. Okay. Thank you very much both. I'm sure it won't be a surprise that after the considerable public debate we've had, I am reaffirming the decision made back on the 31st of July. The main thing around the call-in was around whether or not I had enough information or the correct information or adequate information, and to this day no one has put forward any new information based on anything that I didn't already know, so I'm confident that I had all the information required to make the decision in July, and I'm confident and happy to remake that decision today. So can the record show that I'm reaffirming the decision made on the 31st of July 2018? Okay, thank you very much everyone, have a good evening.